And would you say, Jesus, help me?
Jesus, help me.
To be what you want me to be.
Be what you want me to be.
Do what you want me to do.
Do what you want me to do.
Because people without you go to hell.
Because people without you go to hell.
I just did that. This month we are taking a look at finances. Last week I told you that 3 out of every 4 of Jesus' parables are about finances, 2,300 verses in the Bible about finances. You cannot preach the word and not stumble into money and stumble into finances. But I know that people are very sensitive about talking about finances in church, and so if you've been here before, you've heard this, but I have a 3-part pledge to you when it comes to talking about finances in church. The first is, I will never manipulate you to get you to give. In other words, I'm not going to preach a giving sermon and then make you cry and then pass a plate. Now, I can't promise never to present a need and to take an offering for that need, but I promise it's always going to, it's never going to be to, play around with you. And actually, this week there's going to be some deeper rocks coming out where I'm going to tell you about some things that I've been through in the area of giving that has kind of caused me to have that perspective. The second pledge is, I will not lead where I will not go. Now, Inger, Lisa, and I have spent some time talking about what I get to share with you. Because I, she didn't want our W-2s on the screen. But I believe you can't lead where you won't go, and you can't lead, don't tell anybody you went. And so we're going to be as transparent as possible without embarrassing my wife with our finances, because we don't have everything right, but we have done some things right and reap the benefit of that. So we just want to be transparent with what we've done right and what we've done wrong. And the third is, I will not rob you of God's best for your life by not talking about money in church. I know a lot of pastors who do that. And I believe it robs you. If these principles work in my life, wouldn't it be I'd be a selfish jerk not to communicate that with you? And so anyway, that's so my intention is never to offend anybody. It's not a plot to get your money. I just can't preach the word without spending some time on this. Jesus said, "Where your heart is, there's also your treasure." And so our wallets represent what's our hearts. Our checkbooks represent our priorities, and so that's why we're taking the time to do that, to do this. Today's message is called Act Your Wage. You ever heard someone say act your age? Just act your wage. Last couple, we talked about it last week that we are in bondage to money when we can't do things. It's only been, there's this golden rule that some of your parents had, my grandparents had, that we don't have anymore. There's something that they lived by that we just don't anymore. And what that is, that this golden rule that has been completely lost in our culture, is that our grandparents and moms and dads absolutely adhered to, without compromise, but we don't adhere to at all. And that golden rule is, if you don't have the money, you don't get the stuff. If you don't have it, if you don't pay for it, you don't get it. You've only been able to rack up your credit cards in the last, I don't know how many years, all of my life, but some of you probably remember when American Express was just getting going. They were kind of the first, as far as what I've seen, the first credit card company. And what was that, the 60s? Even later than that? Or earlier than that? How did they do it? Like money's traveler's checks and stuff. But it's certainly not before the Great Depression. So I didn't get that. There was a time when if you didn't have the money, you didn't get the stuff. And now we live in a culture that, we get out of college, we go for we start our careers, we start our jobs, and we look at our parents' house, so we look at where our parents are driving, and we see what took them a lifetime to acquire and build, and we look at it and say, you know what? I think I deserve that right now. We are an entitled society. That we want the American dream all at one time, right at the beginning, without having to wait for it. And so we go into debt for it. Now, it is an American problem, but if you've been watching the news, you also know that it's an international problem. that people are so completely in debt from the very beginning. But there was a time when people actually pinched pennies. And we are a generation of pretenders. We have the stuff, but we don't own it. We're pretending. And we are all, and the Bible talks about this. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 7. It says, one man pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. As we walk around, in debt up to our eyeballs, and it's all about cash flow and managing that debt, we're pretending to have stuff we don't really have. Last week we talked about that you're a slave to the borrower when you are in debt to somebody. And so there's some biblical values we're going to take a look at today, and then we're going to have some nut and bolt stuff that we're going to take a look at today that I think is very exciting. Number one, biblical values. Embrace the value of self-control. Who loves self-control? Nobody loves. I just read a book, The Power of Self-Control. That's actually some ideas from that book led through into our New Year's Eve service about goals and stuff. And if you were to boil down what makes some people successful and some people not successful, is their level and their ability to delay gratification. They've done studies with kids where they put them in a room and they tell the kid, maybe you've read this study, I've read it in a few different books, and so it's a pretty common one, and they put a pile of marshmallows, and they told the kids, they said, they put one marshmallow on the table, and they said, here's marshmallow, and they were really young kids, with toddlers, even a little younger than a little. And if you don't eat that marshmallow, when I come back, you're going to get all of these marshmallows. And it was a big pile of marshmallows. And so then they would leave the room, and some kids would just chomp marshmallow, but other kids would have the ability to look at that marshmallow and not eat it and wait for the bigger reward. And then they would go on and they would track the difference in these two kids through their and it's an old study, all the way into their career. And, it's no surprise, right? That the young kids that were able to see through the one marshmallow to the pile of marshmallows are successful in every area of their life. And actually, if you boil God's word down, if you dig deep into whatever principle, most of them, I can't think of one that doesn't, maybe you can, of God's principles that isn't delaying gratification now so I can have something much better later. Isn't that what a lot of sin is? We see something we want. God has a perfect plan for your life to give you something, but the enemy comes and says, here, I got the same thing, but it's cheap and it's easy and it'll fill your needs and we take the shortcut. But in God's way, we wait, and he blesses us as a result of that. And so embrace the value of self-control. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28. Like a city whose walls are broken down is a man who lacks self-control. If you don't have self-control, any whim, you're going to be victim to any whim that comes by. So do we need all of these things that we have? I once made the mistake of, I drink really cheap coffee now, so now I drink Starbucks. It costs me $1.80 because that's where the most caffeine is, because you don't want to water the caffeine down with cream. You want to get as much as you can. And, but I used to buy, I had a $6 cappuccino I used to get, because I'd have them pour extra shots in and stuff, and Luna Coffee across the street from my house. We dump money into coffee, we add up all these things, and we don't even think about it. And so, number 2, embrace the value of sacrifice. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.
Okay.
Who, for the joy set before him,
There you
endured the cross, the joy that he had to see through to the cross. Because it requires waiting for that big pile of marshmallows, but you're looking at the one marshmallow. You know it? And it takes self-control and sacrifice. But just to give you an idea, we're talking about getting out of debt a little bit today. Because I believe that God has a plan for your life where you are not in debt. Average credit card debt in America is $14,000, 517. The minimum payment at 18% for $14,517 is $217.93. If you made that minimum payment, it would take you 40 years to pay off. Okay? My goodness, that's hard. Oh, wait, I had that number next. Scott, your head is not... See, I had to take a blowtorch to the trailer this morning, and I've been one off ever since. Anyway, if you pay the same $217 for 40 years, the same time it takes you to pay that off, you could have $3 million. If you were to invest $14,517 for 40 years, that would be over $1 million. And so debt, it's no surprise to you that if you add up all of your debt, all of the things that you are trying to manage in cash flow, that if you didn't have that, that's a substantial portion of your budget, right? For most of us, we look at all the things we're making payments on. We got cars, we got credit card debt that is just, dumb consumer debt. We've got student loans, we've got mortgages, we've got second mortgages. And you put that all together, how much of your budget, how much of your monthly cash flow is satisfying all of those responsibilities? We live in a culture that lives paycheck to paycheck because I owe, off to work I go, And when we're in bondage to that if we missed a month paycheck, that our world would come crashing down. The creditors would be calling because there wouldn't be enough money to satisfy all of it. And so number 3, embrace the value of planning. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? Luke chapter 14, verse 28. I would dare say almost all of us, the way we deal with this mountain of debt and cash flow that we're wrestling with, not all of you, some of you are better, but this is my tendency as well. You got all of this debt, and then it's like, it doesn't even matter anymore. Out of sight, out of mind, I'm just not going to think about it. And so then when you're making your financial decisions, it's like you're looking at, I heard one guy say it this way, somebody that should have known better. He was in trouble financially, and he had an $80 a cable bill, and he said, I just kept the cable because it doesn't even matter anymore. I mean, as if $80 a month is really going to make that difference. Well, when that's your attitude, those $80 a month, they add up in a big-time hurry, and you're just not looking at your debt at that point, and you're just managing it. And so embrace the power of planning. What do you mean by planning? Well, there are a couple of things that I want to encourage you to do this morning that I believe God can use to set you free. And the first is, I want to encourage you to save up $1,000 before you do anything else. If you take the Crown Financial, Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, all of the financial gurus will tell you to do this. Why? Because if your car breaks down and you don't have $1,000 set aside for emergencies, where does that $600 bill come from? It comes up, it goes right on the credit card. You got to have your car to go to work, right? So you whip up that credit card and you put that, and then you pay interest on it. And so number 1, have some money set aside for those kinds of emergencies. How do you get that $1,000? I'm so tight. Sell something, hawk something, cut out something, but get $1,000 in the bank that you can have, that if something breaks or something happens, you don't get tanked. You don't get completely offset. Now, the second thing, and the thing that I really want to take a few minutes to talk to you about today, because this is exciting, is the debt snowball. Now, rather than me stumbling through these numbers, I found somebody online who says it a lot better than me. Aren't you glad?
Ready?
Bless God, would you roll that illustration, please? We did a Crown Financial is our favorite financial class of all of them that are out there. And Inger Lisa and I did that how many years ago? 8 years ago. And we started our debt snowball. And now I'm not going to stand up here and tell you we're perfect, because we're not. But we know, I'm not allowed to tell you when, but we have a D-Day. That D-Day is the day that we are out of debt. And what does that mean? That means school loan paid for. That means house paid for. That means completely out of debt. And I think the same would be true for you. When I take a step back and I say, what if I didn't have a house payment? What if I didn't have all of these things that we are paying off and that we are working towards? What if we didn't have any of that? And then you put all of that together and he ended up with $1,000 at $1,100. What could you do in your life if you were out of debt? What is the security that you could have if you were out of debt? Now, remember I told you that I think that our economy in America is not finished bumping around. I think that there are a very good chance that there's going to be some difficult days ahead. And how do you defend yourself against people in Washington being idiots? How do you defend yourself against a world economy that is going in the toilet, and whole countries declaring bankruptcy? And how do you, little old you in Fargo, defend yourself against that? The answer is, don't be in a position to let them hurt you. How do you do that? You don't be in hot to them. Because how bad would the world have to be if your house is paid for, if your cars are paid for, if your school loans are paid for, if you're out of debt? It doesn't take that much to live anymore, does it? Now, daydream for a minute. What it would be like to be out of debt. And this is something we do. Ingrid, Lisa, and I think I shared with you that for us, looking at our finances is the most important thing that we do, because it keeps us on track to getting to our goal. Now, if your D-Day is 3 years out and it really takes you 6, or it takes you a little longer, like I never, remember when I said I never achieved my goals? This is one of them we never achieved. But we climbed towards it. and looking at that. But as you begin to, it's really healthy to begin to daydream, what could my world be like if I didn't have this debt? If I didn't have these payments anymore? And I'll tell you what, I daydream about what I could give. I daydream about the security for my family. I daydream about never having to worry about paying for college for my kid. I daydream about all of these things that we worry about. All of a sudden, if you were set free, all the opportunities. God could call you to, when we're out of debt, and God called Ingrid Lisa to leave her job and just be in the ministry, we could do that. You have options to do anything in your life when that happens. And so I implore you today to take a moment and to get out of debt. Now, not all debt is created equal. There's actually a couple of things that I think you should go in debt for, or 3 things possibly. One is, if you're a business person, if your money makes money and you're not going to lose the money, that's good money. There's also other money that makes money. That is school. I think that if you are going to college, especially if you don't major in psychology and music like yours truly, if you major in something that has a paycheck at the end of it, that is something that's worthwhile to go into debt for. The last one is your home is a good thing to go in debt for initially. And you can, don't borrow as much as the bank tells you that you should, because they always will get you in trouble if you listen to them. But you do your own budget and decide how much you can afford. Don't let them tell you, because that'll never work for you. But I want to encourage you today that you would take a step back from your finances and do the debt snowball. Now, we showed the video, and I want to, next week, I'm going to have Nathan come in here and share with you. And the reason why Nathan is with our kids right now, he and Brittany, who, by the way, are fantastic with their finances. But Nathan, all day, every day, he's a nonprofit credit counselor. In other words, he works with people all day with this kind of stuff and the debt snowball. And the way they make their money, just so you know, is sometimes a credit counseling agency can renegotiate your debts. And if you're wondering how could they be in business, that's how. You pay less, and they get a percentage of the money they save. So it's a really good deal. It's going to cost you. But I'm going to have Nathan come and share, so that if there's some of you out there that would say, you know what, I'm in trouble, I need help, that's what he does all the time. And we will be having financial Bible studies in the future, because I believe that, imagine if we were a church of people that were out of debt, what God could do. Imagine if all the people that step it up and do their finances God's way and stop being a slave to the creditors, of what would be possible for the ministry. God could call you into the full-time ministry, and you could do it because you're not enslaved. If God calls you to do extravagant things in giving, you could do it And that's exciting. And the mission that can go forward. And so I want to encourage you today to begin to take a look at your finances and to do the work and to dig in there and set up the debt snowball. Now, you may have noticed on there, sometimes people think that I should pay off all of my highest priced stuff first, the highest interest first, 18%, 12% working down. All of the financial gurus that I mentioned all say the same thing, and that is, don't pay off your highest interest first. Pay off your lowest amounts first. And the reason is we are emotional creatures. And it is really exciting when you start banging out those debts and rolling that into the next debt. And it is just really, really fun. You begin to see that snowball happen. So then by the time you get to that bigger debt, you got big chunks of money attacking it, which is a lot more fun than, so start with your smallest bills. List them all down. Now, most people have no idea what they owe. And most of the people that we've walked through with their finances, and you list everything, it can be a very scary experience for all involved, because ignorance is bliss. We've never added up all of the credit cards that we got. And you take a look at it, and they're like, how is this even going to happen? But then you just begin working it. But then, and Ingrid Lisa's really good at this. And this, if you want help with this, you can see Nathan, you can talk to us, you can take one of our financial Bible studies. But one of the really neat things that you can do is set up this Excel spreadsheet with all of this stuff in it. And you plug in all of your numbers, you plug in the extra money, and then you click a button, and it tells you your D-Day, the day that you are out of debt. And can I tell you that day is always closer than you ever dreamed, even with an amount of extra money as little as $200 a month. You can take care of that thing, and it is very, very exciting. And so here's what we do, what I do, is you look at that D-Day that is so far in the distance, but it's closer than you ever thought it could be, and then you start to daydream, what could God do in my life if I was really free? What could God do in our lives if we had the freedom to do anything? He could call us anywhere, and we could go because we're free. What could we do for our family? What could we do if we didn't have this responsibility? I believe God wants us healthy financially. I believe that God has a plan for your life, and I believe that plan is not for you to be a slave to the creditors. God wants you to be free. Because once you're free, mission trip, piece of cake. Once you're free, once you're free, change vocation, piece of cake. Once you're free, the world doesn't end when you lose your job like it would have before. God has a plan for your life, and He doesn't want you enslaved. Remember, we're only about the second generation ever to have this problem. Grandpa and Grandma, if they didn't have the money, they didn't buy it. Oh, I forgot to share with you this statistic. Before the Great Depression, 2% of homes were financed. 2%. 2 out of every 100 homes were financed at the bank before the Great Depression. From before the Great Depression, fast forward 40 years, so after the Great Depression, the baby boomer generation, 98% of homes were financed. Now, I think it'd be 99.99% of homes are financed now. We live with a different set of problems that previous generations have had to deal with. But isn't it encouraging that we read that verse in Proverbs, that God knew how to handle our situation? They live like they have lots even though they don't. We read that verse in Proverbs at the very beginning. If we live our lives God's way, if we handle our finances God's way, He has the solution in His 2,000-year-old book, how to deal with the financial crisis today. And that is, God never intended for you to be a hot to all these people. And He wants to set you free. And so in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming months, I I implore you as strongly as I possibly can, get whatever help you need. Do it yourself, depending on how comfortable you are. But crunch your numbers and crunch your debt. Ask God what He would have of you, and discover your D-Day. Put a date on the calendar that this is the day that I am not going to be in bondage to finances anymore. This is the day. Now, over the next coming weeks, we're going to talk about some other stuff. There's two ways to get more money in your bank account, to spend less. The other is to make more. And I want to encourage you to do that as well. And we have some ideas for that coming up. But get that D-Day on the calendar. And once that D-Day is on the calendar, when you're driving down the road, I kidded with you a few weeks ago that sometimes I'll buy a lottery ticket, and I daydream about what I do with that lottery ticket, about how I give that money away and what I would do with it. It is just as fun to daydream, at least for me, because there's a better chance of it actually happening, is daydreaming about what it's going to be like to be free from debt. What it's going to be like to not have that house payment anymore. What it's going to be like to have that cash flow in your house completely locked up. And it's more fun to daydream than lottery, because I have a date on the calendar. I know my D-Day. Now you say, Pastor Scott, I thought you said you never achieve your goals. I don't, okay? But what if it takes twice as long as the goal? It's still awesome. You see what I'm saying? It's about progress, not perfection. If you fall off the wagon and do dumb stuff with your finances, you know how we tend to handle it? We say, oh man, I'm just not even going to look at it because I don't want to know. I want to go this place for vacation. I want this kind of car. And if I look hard at my finances, I'm not going to do it, so I'm just not going to look. That's not God's plan for your life. That's an attack of the enemy to hamstring you and keep you in bondage so you can't do and be everything that God intends for you. So get a D-Day and then daydream about it and keep on keeping on until you attain it. I believe that's God's plan for your life. I see it in His Word. I see it in the wisdom out of His Word. And remember, the world hasn't always been this way. We're only about the second generation ever to be in debt in this way. It's so easy. By the time you're in college, you're racking up credit card bills. We love you, God. God, I pray that we would be obedient to you in all things. Well, Lord, I pray for your people that each person sitting here this morning would get to know and experience the freedom of only owing the debt of love and owing you, God. We'll never get that paid. We give you all that we are. We want to be obedient in all things. We love you, Lord.